Thanks for joining us. This is Sippin' Tea with Nat and Z. I'm Nat.
And I'm Z. Hello, hello.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Konnichiwa. All that, you know, c'est bon, whatever, bonjour,
Yes,
all
all
of
that good
that.
stuff.
I apologize in advance for my voice is a bit raspy and deep from singing and screaming for Janet Jackson last week. Thoroughly enjoyed the concert. People in the stands, I'm sure, were quite upset. Lil Kim opened for her.
Yeah, I saw that because Ludacris is getting his Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Right, right. So, yeah, so we didn't get there till like maybe near the end of Lil Kim, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of glad we did. Let's just say that. And then she tried to do the Rhythm Nation tribute to Janet. No, nah, it just wasn't hitting. And then she tried to keep up with the dun, 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 whatever. You know what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it like y'all can see, but Z can see. So yeah, it was. And then the lights went out and we were like, is she done? Is she done? And then the lights came back on and we were like, I guess so. So it was very anticlimactic.
Well, let me just say, maybe, she just wasn't fully prepared because they had months to prepare for this concert, right?
They did.
But maybe they knew that she was, I don't know. I try, I love
But Lil
Kim.
Kim's been on tour for
So,
a minute. I've been seeing her stuff on IG and her
yeah,
doing you know what I'm
but,
talking about, that little
but,
dance she be doing.
yeah, but being on tour and preparing for tour are two different things.
True that.
And after several contortions to her body, it just doesn't move the same.
It does not.
So I try to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I'll just leave it at that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think she was definitely made an effort, but it was like those of us that know her from back in the day.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, think about it this way: like you look at Janet. Janet's 56 years old.
mm-hmm.
I don't know how Lil Kim is, but I know she's not 56.
She's about our age, probably.
Yeah, and just looking at the difference in performance style, regardless if Janet got rid of one whip or not, I don't know. Is that like a urban myth? Anyway, any contortions or anything that she may have gotten done to her body, she looks amazing. She's the
Mm-hmm.
first half of the show. She just did a lot of shoulder movements.
Mm-hmm.
But the second but the second part of the show, she danced her ass off. I was like, okay, hashtag goals. I need
Well,
to get
because she probably was trying to conserve her energy for the
right.
first half. It was like,
Look,
just
y'all
so I
get
can get it for
yeah,
the end. And then you have to also think like Janet hasn't been like consistently touring
yeah,
like some people. Like for example, Usher. Usher is going to give you the same. He's going to make sure that his dance moves are like
on
dancing
point.
moves. Right.
We're trying to go see Usher in October.
There's a lot of people like Beyonce that she's going to
Yeah,
give you, even though people have been saying, well, we'll save that for the hot tea. Let's just
yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead into the
The
tea of the
topic
day,
for
and
today.
oh yeah, the topic for the day is called resentment.
Yeah.
Um, and we have a good conversation set up for this. But what is the tea on the table, man?
So, the tea on the table to continue our series of highlighting places to have high tea in the DMV. We are going with Kingbird. It is the Watergate Hotel's Kingbird restaurant. A couple years ago, they got in a bit of a hot tea, haha, pun intended, when a $400 cup of tea showed up on the menu. And they were like, I'm sorry, $400 for some tea. So that was soon adjusted. Now there's weekend afternoon tea that's much more reasonable for $75. I don't know if the $400 tea is really still on there, but hey, go for what you know. It is DC. Some folks got it like that. So it has a swinging 60s theme menu. It has retro desserts, finger sandwiches, and that feature Ivy City smoked salmon with caviar and bottomless tea. So it's Watergate downtown, waterfront property right next to the Kennedy Center. Check it out. I
Oh,
mean, if you balling like that, and you can
all
get
right.
that $400 cup of tea, knock yourself out. But yeah. See, I think that might be on a summer outing this year.
Yeah. And if you know, the Watergate is very famous during the Nixon
Mhm.
presidency. So there's also a bit of history there. So if you'd like to go and see where he got, that's a
Yeah.
great place to
And
do
how they
it.
refurbished. I went there 2 years ago when they had the igloos outside.
Hmm.
That was really nice. And then, the year after, I went for happy hour for some and the bar decor is gorgeous. Like, however they remodeled, it's absolutely stunning. And the bathrooms are banging too. Oh, yeah,
I'm
and
gonna
the
have to
rooftop.
venture.
And the
I
rooftop bar.
may have
Yeah.
to venture down there.
Very,
Okay.
very luxe and very, "Ooh, I feel fancy." I wouldn't show
Okay.
up there in Tim's in a T-shirt. I
And
would
they
wanna
probably
go.
wouldn't let you in with Tim's
You
in a
no, I
t-shirt.
doubt they would. Maybe them Tim
So
boots. You know them Tim boots from back in the day?
you mean those Manolo Blahniks
Yeah.
with the high heels?
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Who's to
maybe because it
say?
has a heel on it, but check it out.
Who's
Nice
to
spot.
say?
Mhm.
Yes. Hot tea, not a lot.
Mhm.
I saw the Color Purple trailer today dropped.
Oh, really?
So for those of you who don't know, they are doing a redo of the Color Purple, but they're basing it
What?
off of the stage play. Oprah is producing it. I think Steven Spielberg does have something to do with it because I saw his name in the credits. Quincy Jones is still a part of it.
Oh.
You have Fantasia playing Celie. You have Danielle Brooks playing Miss Sophia. Halle Bailey, who is also in The Little Mermaid,
Mhm.
is playing Celie's sister from when they were younger.
Oh,
Um, Taraji P. Henson is Suge Avery. Um,
I can see that.
I don't know who's playing young Fantasia. I think she's a newcomer. Domingo Coleman is playing Mister.
Mhm.
Uh, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Uh, he played Dr. Dre
Oh, him.
in the movie Straight
Didn't
Outta
he play in
Compton.
Jumanji too?
I don't know.
With
Uh,
The Rock? I feel like he
I
did.
don't remember him
And
in
Kevin Hart.
Jumanji. Maybe he was in there, but I know the guy that played Dre, Dr. Dre, in the Straight Outta Compton movies in it. Her is in it. I believe she's
Mm,
Squeak. I think it's Squeak. So it looks pretty good. So I'm excited to see it.
okay.
I did tear up a little bit, but it also could be because I'm PMSing. So who's to say?
Hey,
And
it's
I've
okay
had a
though.
week, and I've had a rough couple of days, so that also could be it too.
Mhm.
But it was good. So definitely something I'm gonna check out. It comes out Christmas of this year.
Nice.
Um, so there has been rumors that Jonathan Majors and Megan Good are an item, and then photos came out recently with them getting off a plane holding hands.
When did
It
she get
literally
divorced? I'm all late.
she's been divorced for a minute.
Hmm.
If there ever was a time, I've always been. I know that there are PR stunts, right? And I fully understand the Hollywood machine, and I
Mhm.
understand that certain things, certain relationships take place to do certain things for artists, right?
Right.
And actors, um, and I know that, but there was still a part of me that just felt like there were some people whose integrity just would not allow them to engage in such activities.
Right.
And I still not saying that Jonathan Majors is guilty, not guilty, right? I'm from a legal perspective. I'm just waiting for all the facts to be presented before I make a decision. And I have my own personal opinions on a lot of things that I'm not going to share on this because I like to keep. I'm not going to share on this. However, I this is the first time where I've fully committed to yes, this is a PR stunt. This
Mm.
man has not been one to date us. His dating history has not really
Really?
been us. So the fact that now all of a sudden he's dating us, and not just us, someone who's been on men's top 10 list for a very, very, very long time, just seems, and she's not like, she is a, how can I put this? She's not a Zoe Saldana black chick.
Oh,
She's not a Halle Berry black girl. She is definitely the Nia Long black girl, the Regina King black girl. So you understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
She and I mean she can teeter, but she's definitely the black girl's black girl. And what I mean by that is like Halle always seemed like very unattainable. Black woman, but very unattainable.
Right.
She is a beautiful woman that men like, oh, I can, that looks like something I can do. You understand what I'm
Right, right,
saying?
right. Like, okay,
Um,
I could get that. Maybe
yes.
I can get to that level.
Yes.
Right,
And she's also not somebody that anybody would consider a pass around. Like the relationships she has been in have been very long term, serious relationships.
right.
Like she was with Thomas Jones. He's an ex football player. If you watch P Valley, he
Oh, I
is
gotta
in
catch up
P
on P
Valley. Um, he then she was married for a while. I feel like she was with another. I feel like she was with someone else before Thomas Jones or somewhere in between. I've read recently somebody she was dating. I was like, dang, she was dating him. Didn't even know.
Right. You don't hear about so much about.
You don't. And
Yeah,
people been giving her a lot of slack because they're like, girl, how much was the check? Because why would you do this? Why would you align yourself with someone who is in this kind of a situation? Now, benefit of doubt, maybe she was the person he was texting that caused the altercation between him and this girl. So maybe she
maybe.
was in it before him and really whatever. I don't know. A lot of people now are saying it makes sense because she just put out recently that Jim Brown,
Uh-huh.
football player, old head,
Right.
60s, he was her godfather. And if you
He
know,
was
yes, and if you know,
Jim
you know,
Brown.
Jim Brown has been
Mm,
linked to a lot of domestic
a
abuse.
lot.
He um, was accused of throwing his girlfriend out of a window, a
Yep.
two-story
Two stories.
window. I've seen pictures of her, the girl being carted off into, I watched the Playboy documentary. His name was brought up a couple times and that.
I
So,
was watching that stuff. That yeah,
yeah,
he was because he was always at the mansion.
yes, yes, always. So, a lot of people are saying, okay, now it makes sense because, of course, this is the type of man she would get with. Now, I am going to say this, right?
Uh huh.
She is, how can I put this? We tend to try to hold women accountable for the actions of the men they're with.
Mm.
If he physically harmed his ex, he physically harmed his ex. You cannot hold her accountable for actions that he engaged in
Mm-hmm.
prior to the relationship.
Agreed.
However, there is something to be said about someone being associated with somebody who is allegedly being who is allegedly an abuser.
Yeah.
But I'll say that this new generation picks and chooses how they want to see things
Yeah.
because Chris Brown literally beat the brakes off of Rihanna. We saw the pictures.
Right.
He beat that girl
Up.
upside her head. And people still going to this man's concerts. Nobody,
So, but let me
hell,
ask you this:
mm-hmm.
at what point do are they abusive forever?
I
And
don't
are
think,
and how do we, if they're trying to get therapy or do better, so that as much as we talk about therapy, I know this is like a sidebar, but
mm-hmm,
um there are abusers that get into therapy and they change and they go on with the rest of their life and never assault anyone else again,
mm-hmm.
right? So is that person always deemed an abuser regardless of what they did? So does that invalidate the therapy that we often promote? Because
I,
yes, he did that, and he is a product of his environment because of what he saw growing up. Good, bad, or indifferent, he's mimicking what is, and you already know there's some other stuff going on with Chris.
mm-hmm.
So and then there's the poking the bear thing where some chicks just do stuff to see if a dude'll, I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but they chicks that bait. So how do we reconcile at what point? Because I haven't heard of anything else that we know of with Chris since Rihanna, and that was when he was what, late, early
Oh, then you
20s.
haven't been paying attention
Yeah, I
because
haven't. Like I don't.
he has been linked to being abusive to Karuchi. Um,
Oh, that's right. I take that back. I did take her back.
yeah, and then
With the Karuchi.
and then there have been other situations where people try to pin stuff on him, but it hasn't stuck.
Got it.
I'm just gonna say I'm not discounting that people can change because they absolutely can. my thing is you need to see the change, right?
Yeah.
And people need to really like I'm not I'm not going to say that Chris Brown is still an abuser. What
Mhm.
I'm going to say is you need to stop putting yourself into situations where people can continue to put that label on you, and stop doing things
Yes.
and finding yourself in situations where people consistently put that on you.
Like with Usher situation and all
What?
that. With them, with they said Usher and Chris Brown last week. That
Oh
fell.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But even with that, like I know, like, and the actually the direction I was going with this is people didn't hold Rihanna to the same accountability as I feel like they're holding Megan Good to. And maybe it's because she was the victim,
Ah,
but she got
right,
back with Chris Brown and is still friends with this guy.
right.
Like they're still friends.
Mhm.
So yes, people can change. I believe that. But I feel like people need to have like I just feel like we just live in this culture where people pick and choose when they want to have smoke with people. Like I
Yeah.
never liked Taylor Swift. I still don't like Taylor Swift. And it does not surprise me that now she has aligned herself with someone who is very has been accused of and has been heard promoting white supremacy,
Oh
has
snap!
engaged in being gratified by watching porn where black women are humiliated, degraded, hurt, and so it's just a lot, right? And her fans are still like, "Well,
Yes.
I'm still Taylor Swift." I'm like, "Okay, like y'all don't see what's going on here."
Like who's she?
But
Oh
that's a
wow.
story for another day.
Yeah, that
But
is.
I'm not going to. The jury's still out in that whole situation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make heads or tails of it, but it just is what it is. But okay, that's enough. We can take a quick break and come back with the actual topic, which is resentment.
Right. And we're back. So, like we said, the topic today is resentment. And I think a lot of people are maybe quick to say what they think resentment is, or that they feel resentment, or what situations can foster resentment. But it is a complex emotion that can arise from so many experiences, a variety of experiences, such as feeling slighted or wronged by another person, a perception of injustice or unfairness, or experiencing a sense of powerlessness or helplessness. I think that's a big one. And it's in tying back to the episode, sorry, that we did last week about being bitter. It's also a feeling of bitterness or anger that can be directed towards individuals, groups, or even society as a whole. And I think it is a broader, significant word, and concept, considering the state of the world today
Mm,
and stuff. So I think it's very, um, timely that we're
yeah,
talking about it because of people's actions and the tit for tat, and just people feeling like they're owed something for society's purposes, and they feel the people that aren't marginalized are feeling marginalized and feeling some sense of resentment.
right.
So yeah.
And you know, there are always signs um, uh, that one can look at to determine whether or not resentment is living within you or maybe even living in someone close to you.
Mhm.
So it can appear in many different forms. And you can tell if you or someone else is harboring resentment if you see continual or recurring feelings of a strong emotion like anger when you think about a specific interaction or experience. The inability, like we talked about this, to stop thinking about an event that triggered strong emotions. We talked about this when we talked about bitterness. Feelings of regret. We talked about what feelings
Yeah.
of regret can do to one if you haven't found the tools to navigate through that. Fear or avoidance of conflict. I think sometimes people don't realize that when you avoid certain things, a buildup can
Mm.
occur.
Mm.
Um, Tense
Facts.
relationships, whether it's tense familial relationships, like we see this a lot with parent to child,
Mhm.
and feeling invisible, inadequate, or less than. So when we were talking about the signs of resentment, I was like, I can point out so many times in my life, very from in the past to very recent,
Mhm.
some things that were very small to some things that were like large and looming situations
Right.
that happen that I'm like, oh, um, I still feel a tinge of resentment over some situations in my life, um, that happened over the course of my life. Definitely not as strong as I have before, but definitely it's there. And I think for me, some of the biggest signs for me that I've had resentment are like the feeling of regret, the fear and avoidance of conflict, and the sometimes the inability to stop thinking about an event.
Yeah.
um Case in point, I had a conversation with my sister yesterday, and I forgot. We were all over the place, and I'm all over the place sometimes, especially
Mhm.
the last few days. I've just been mentally all over the place. And my sister was talking about she's getting a new manager, and the manager, she doesn't know this person, and she started having a lot of anxiety and
Mhm.
just feeling like it was just bubbling over. And was actually triggered about something that happened at her other job.
Mhm.
And that, because she got a new manager and that manager was just an asshole. So she got triggered by that.
Right.
And then it became an inability to stop thinking about that event.
And it
Like,
yeah.
and so she was carrying it into this meeting with her new boss. And then she started to talk about all of the moving pieces that brought them to the situation. And I had to talk her off the ledge, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Because what you don't realize is in that there is going to be some resentment. You're going to start resenting your new boss, your
Mm.
bosses, for putting you in a situation, and you're not even giving this person the
A
benefit of
chance.
the chance. And there's probably a lot of resentment left over from
Right.
how that last job ended,
Mm.
which is causing you now to have these feelings
Like, what
about
if?
something that hasn't even occurred. You don't even
Right.
really know how this person's going to be. And the only reason why I was able to walk her through that is because I had to do that for myself.
Ah.
So, I mean, fear, I mean, I'm pretty sure there have been situations where you've avoided conflict
Oh, yeah.
for a long
Oh.
time, and then that
Oh.
shit boiled over.
Yes. Yes. I think you and Nicole were there one time
Oh, okay.
when I built up stuff that I just wanted to get over, and I resented the situation, and I just needed it to when we had that roommate, when Nicole
Oh,
and I,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Why is this person still here?"
Mm-hmm.
And just showing up, and then it built up, and then, it kinda I went into a whole other zone that
Mm-hmm.
I stepped outside of myself. I
Mm-hmm.
I left my body because
Yes.
it had built up.
Yes.
Yes.
And I feel like that is a thing that we don't talk about enough. I feel
Mhm.
like people who fear or avoid conflict. I don't fear conflict. I
Mhm.
tend to avoid it. And
Right.
I think when people feel like you avoid something, it's just like you are fearful of that interaction.
Right.
Sometimes that for me that's not the case. I avoid conflict because I will go the fuck off. I will go off. I will black out. And there is just like nothing after
Yeah.
that point. Because I'm
Yeah.
one of those type of people that I just like eat stuff. And I'm like, I'm just gonna eat that because I think through it and I'm like, is this really something
Yes.
to say something about?
Is the
And I'll
fallout
eat it.
worth it?
Is the fallout worth it? Or is me mentioning it is going to be worth it? Is a
Right.
person going to receive what I'm saying
Right.
enough for me to move past it, right?
Mhm.
If they're not, then I'm just putting a lot of stress and pressure on myself.
Mhm.
For
For an
what? For
expectation
an
of
expectation,
something
right?
that may never come to resolution.
Exactly. But you can only do that for so
So long. It's
long.
poking the bear.
It is. And then I am like the built up anger. Like I always say, my husband is 0 to 60, right? Zero and then he's 60. I am zero,
Mhm.
35,
Mhm.
45, 55,
Girl, me too.
75,
Yep.
120.
To the point that there's a clutching of the pearls, like, "What happened? I don't understand. Why did she act like that?
Yes,
Oh
yes,
my goodness, I never
yes,
knew
yes.
that."
So,
Da 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 da. Because I know that when that happened, for whatever I said, when y'all told you and Nicole said I said something, I blacked out. And Nicole was like, "I
hmm,
just don't ever want to make Natalie mad
yeah.
because I've never seen that side of her." And I, to this day, I don't remember what I said. But that's like you said, it just there's a point where you just blow up and black.
You blow up. And I think that the point where you blow up is the resentment. You
Yeah.
have finally got to a point where you're resenting the fact that this person isn't respecting the fact that you have
Yes.
been on chill for so long and
Right.
now you have lost
Oh,
it. So I
and they
think
look at
that
you like you crazy.
exactly, but that has a negative impact on your mental health.
Oof, girl, yes. And then some on so many levels. It's normal for us to resent, to have that emotion to resent certain situations, right? But like Z said, if it is not addressed, it can be extremely harmful. Holding on to it can lead to a range of negative emotions, anger, bitterness, and depression. I did uh a workshop this weekend for our chapter on depression. I facilitated that, a discussion on that. And the group of ladies we were talking with, resentment came up a number of times on how it fed into them being depressed and not telling people what was going
Mm.
on. And it
Mhm.
just kept eating it and eating it
Mhm.
and eating it. And it affected them and their mental health and their physical health until they were going down a spiral,
Yeah,
you
cuz
know?
cuz think about it. When you keep swallowing stuff.
Yep.
It's just like if you're eating, right? Food. You at some point you if you just keep eating, at some point you're going to explode, right? You're
Yeah.
going to vomit everywhere. That is basically what holding on to all that stuff and resentment can do. It could literally explode into this vomit of anger and
Yeah.
bitterness and depression and anxiety, like all over the place. It
Yeah.
touches everything.
It really does. It's like like on a spoke on a wheel, that
Mhm.
resentment is in the middle,
Mhm.
and those
Mhm.
spokes, and they touch every aspect of your life, whether it's
Mhm.
subconscious or not.
Mhm.
And it really can manifest in ways: blood pressure, not sleeping or not eating, eating too
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
It's common, and most people, like I said, feel that it comes out of anger because they're being ignored. It's unfair treatment. For example, like, a person might understandably resent a parent after years of abuse, and I've seen this when I used to work in a psychiatric hospital for kids, and the anger that some of the children felt based on the abuse that had unfortunately put them in the position that they were in, because they felt there was no justice to their situation at all, and then they begin to feel like the victim in every situation, and then that can manifest into an altered perception of reality. There are people that I know that everything is woe is me. They got a problem for every solution because they've been victimized, or they feel victimized for so long that resentment has just led them to see any positive anything about life.
These are the people that I say all the time that look to be offended. And it's
Yes.
because for situations like you just said, like sometimes people who look to be offended because, like you said, something happened that has caused some level of resentment.
Yep.
And that resentment has built up to the point where they feel like I didn't receive justice in this situation. So everything is an injustice. And
Yes.
so
Everything.
anything that you say is an injustice. And they are
Yes.
going to
Oh,
just develop this alter, like you said, they just have a negative reaction to
yes.
everything and have an altered perception of reality. They're
Mhm.
never going to, like you say, see a positive outcome
For
to
nothing.
anything.
Yes. I saw this. I don't know if you know about the podcast called The Crew. It's four
Mm,
men that
mm-mm,
talk about life and real shit and how men should be responding and women should be interacting. It's four
mm-hmm,
black men, different I recommend it podcast. It's great.
mm-hmm,
But they talked, one of the ones was watching was how men aren't, the perception that men are not stepping up. And
mm-hmm,
one of the guys sounded just like what we're talking about, with everything with the man and every situation he was the victim. He's like, we're
mm-hmm.
never going to get that way as black people because we never get together. We can never make it work. We can never, 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 never. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. And the other guys were like, dude, you can't keep blaming things on everybody else, and he's like, but man, that's just how it is. It's just how it is. That's the world we live in.
And
And
something happened to him
yes, right.
that
Something did,
caused
I'm
him to be
sure.
that resentful of everything.
Everything. So yeah, it's just, and you think about when you interact with people that talk like that. the negative Nancys of the world, we'll say.
Mhm.
It is just draining. It can intoxicate a person. It can lend to rage and a false sense of power, and it doesn't encourage a healthy form of expression. I think this
Mm-mm.
causes people to rage out, and
Mhm.
they don't realize what the consequences are. But it's because something else. It's like that straw that broke the camel's back.
Mhm.
It's not the straw that they resent. It's all the stuff that has built up, and that one last thing
Mhm.
tips it gives a tipping point, and it keeps moving and going and growing, and if it goes unchecked, it grows into hatred, which I think,
Mhm.
speaking to today's society, the vitriol that you hear about and see on the different platforms, it's crazy sometimes. I'm like, what are you so upset about? And it
Because it's
has nothing.
it's intoxicating.
Yeah,
For
bandwagon.
some people, being angry is intoxicating. It's like a
Yes.
drug because
Drama.
it makes you feel like you have all this power, right? This
Mhm.
bravado, when you get angry, think about how strong you feel sometimes.
Yeah,
But actually,
empowered.
your anger is not a strength, it is a weakness. And that resentment is actually the gas, if you say so, you
Right.
said so to say, in that, right? And you know, I see resentment a lot. I mean, people have resentment in their jobs.
Mhm.
We see this in the government a lot. A lot of people feel slighted, like they didn't get ahead. There's a lot of resentment towards other people because they feel like they got the opportunity that they should have had. We talked about this with bitterness, right?
Right.
But I feel like the biggest place that we see this intoxication, so to speak, how resentment actually shows up and where we can all probably identify is when we're talking about relationships. And I'm not just talking about intimate relationships and talk about
Right.
familial relationships too, because I think a lot of my resentment, if I have had to look at the spectrum of my resentment, the
Mhm.
majority of it would go towards familial relationships,
Right.
right? And it's not uncommon for, and when I shouldn't say intimate relationships because familial relationships are intimate
Yeah.
relationships. But so it's not uncommon for resentment to build up in these types of relationships, and especially the long-term ones. So yes, family relationships are definitely long-term relationships, but like
Mhm.
marriages, right? Long-term partnerships.
Some
And there are a
friendships.
few, yes, friendships. Oh, great, friendships. Yeah, I didn't even
Mhm.
think about that. So some of the common things we found to show up like resentment, some of the causes of
Mhm.
resentment that show up in relationships, they include some things. We're going to go through this and go back because we talked about this a little bit before when we were prepping this, but like keeping score. So that's a big one.
That's a
So, and I
huge
think that's
one.
probably the biggest one that
Yeah,
you see in
for
relationships.
sure.
Like somebody feels like they're doing all the heavy lifting of the relationship.
Mhm.
And because of that, they start to resent the partner.
Right.
So, if you're somebody who's always in charge of the housework or the childcare or being the
Mhm.
primary breadwinner or always being the one to initiate an emotional connection and
Mm.
intimacy, that is going to start to build a
Ooh,
lot
that'll
of
burn
resentment.
on you.
Absolutely. But we're going to come back to that one because that one's a big one.
Mhm.
If there's an unbalanced power dynamic, right? So if one partner in the relationship feels constantly overpowered or
Mhm.
steamrolled over or unheard, they'll start to develop some resentment.
Mhm.
Health and medical issues. I think when it comes to keeping score, health and medical issues is
Yes.
probably the second thing on the list, in my opinion, if I had to rank these, because
Yeah.
I have seen many situations where and I'm talking about again family
Mhm.
and like romantic relationships,
Mhm.
where one person in the relationship is diagnosed with some type of chronic
Mhm.
mental illness, a medical health issue, whatever it is, and that means that their partner has to step up and take on the additional role of a caregiver.
Yep.
And then over time, that partner's caregiver is going to start to feel resentment because they're starting to feel like their own needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
So we're going to get back to that.
Mhm.
And then hurtful words. The longer that a couple spends time together, or the longer that you are in this relationship, the more likely you're going to say something and it's going to be perceived as being hurtful to this other person. So if you're not communicating openly when you feel hurt, like we said, sometimes you have the
Mhm.
fear or avoidance of conflict, right? There's going to be a higher chance of feeling resentment. And then that resentment can end relationships because it bubbles. And then, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And it's hard to get a deeper connection when you feel that
Yeah.
resentment. But if you can work through that resentment, you can deepen your connection. So going back to the keeping score, that I
Mhm.
feel like when I said that's the biggest one, when you look at people who, okay, so I was watching this clip and it's if I can find it on TikTok again, it's some, I don't know if this is real therapy, I don't know, but there's this woman and she's like giving therapy to these couples, and this one particular couple is a black couple, and the wife has a lot of resentment, but so does the husband.
Right.
The wife is resents her husband because she is the breadwinner. She told
Mhm.
her, like, they had this agreement that he would stay home with the child for a certain amount of time and then he would go back to work, and he's still not back to work. She's been the primary breadwinner, working 70 hours a week to
Ooh.
take care of this family. Not and then on top of that, this man then cheated on her multiple times. On top
Ooh.
of that, tried to justify his cheating, saying, I didn't do it at home. It
What?
wasn't in our zip code. I
What?
did it out the
You
country.
got hoes in different
I
area
did it.
codes?
Yes. So, and then she didn't ask me the right question. She's
What's
like, I've been asking you and asking you and
excuse me?
asking you, and you never answer me.
There's a
And
right
he says, well,
question.
she finally asked the appropriate question. Did you ever step out? Like, I guess how she originally asked it wasn't that way. It was a crazy. And then he said, well, I was in Columbia, the country, not the city here in Maryland.
Was he a
I mean,
passport brother?
yeah, I was in Colombia and I was calling her and I told her how much I missed her and how much I was missing her physically and intimately. And she said, well, I thought you would have handled that by now. He took that as, oh, I can go out here and have sex with some of these Colombian women. She was like, no, I was talking about masturbation. How, sir, did we get to?
How do you go from that to what?
So she had a
He just
lot of,
wanted an opportunity. Space. He
right.
thought it was a hall pass.
Yes.
Yes.
So
These ninjas out here.
I, I, you could see the resentment there, rightfully so, right?
Yeah.
Because she was keeping score. I will also say that at some point, she had to take the responsibility of continuing to be in that situation. Because here's the thing, you could keep keeping score. I do all this. I'm the primary breadwinner. I'm the one who's trying to do this. I'm the one who's trying to do that. You're keeping score. Now you've built up resentment. But
Yeah.
what have you done to try? Now you're in therapy, but you're in therapy and it is, I don't see how y'all coming back from this.
Right. Might be a wrap.
I've been in situations where I've kept score.
Me too. Me too.
We just got quiet.
Whew. We think about them situations. Woo! When you be like, you know what, Lord? Lord.
Yeah. But
Lord.
it's human.
It
I've
is.
done it. I know people. So I've been in a situation where somebody was keeping score with me, a friendship, and the friendship was ending. And I explained to them how hurt I was by something they did.
Right.
And they started to list out, I've always thought I was a better friend to you than you were for me. And here are all the reasons why. I was like, God damn. First of
Okay.
all, it wasn't rooted in reality. Again, an altered perception.
Yes.
This person had an altered perception, right?
Oh my
Because of
gosh.
something that happened that I wasn't a part of. They have now taken that altered reality and put it on me. And the things that they were keeping score, I was like, what are you talking about? And this was a friendship that we had that was decades in the making.
Right. There's like pettiness. Cause then I think pettiness braids into resentment
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it just kind of stokes the fires. Pettiness is the coals that get that stuff popping.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, I'm gonna be petty now. Just cause I resent you, I'm gonna do this shit to annoy you.
Yeah.
And now you've triggered the other person. You've triggered yourself by doing it. And the cycle continues,
Yeah.
you
But
know?
a lot of us don't realize that a lot of decisions we make and the way we move through a lot of our relationships is built in, like we say all the time, some type of trauma, some type of
Yeah.
event that happened in your life.
What
And that event
happened?
doesn't even have to, like, for example, I am hyper independent.
Mhm.
I'm hyper independent and I've been made to to be hyper independent because of how I was raised, right?
Mhm.
And there was resentment for a very long time towards my mother, right?
Mhm.
For the hyper independence that I exhibit in my life.
Right.
Why can I just not just let this go? Why do
Right.
I have to feel like nobody can take care of me but
But
me?
right.
Like
But yeah.
you can't take care of me as good as I take care of me.
Right.
I don't trust you to take care of me as much as I can take care of me. So I put a lot of resentment on her. But I mean, I put a lot on her, which then caused me to resent, right?
Right.
And then there was resentment when I was younger growing up because I felt like you made me grow up too fast. Like I'm 10. Why am I taking care of a 5 year old, a
Mhm.
6 year old? This is insane. Why am I a latchkey kid? All
Right.
Gen X went through that, but I'm like, what, why is this happening to me?
Right.
But looking back on it, and I say this a lot, I had to let that resentment go. And the
Mhm.
reason why is because I had to give, we talked about this, everything we talk about all ties back in. I had to give my mom empathy and grace because
Mhm.
she was so young when she had us that
Right.
she was still growing up and trying to figure out her life. My mother was 44 when she died. I was
Mhm.
21,
Wow.
going on 22. You
Mhm.
understand? Like, that is so imagine how old she was. She was 37 and I was in high school.
Yeah.
37. And I was a senior in high school.
Yeah.
Like, I could imagine at 37 having a high schooler. Oh,
Yeah.
shit. I mean, that's just
I
me.
did, but that was a bonus, baby.
But still,
It's a lot. It's kind
yeah.
of you kind of pause and you're like, "Huh, that's kind of crazy
Yes,
that that you're
it's a
this
lot.
age." Because both my kids are in college now, so well, one's about to be done and one's in their sophomore year, but it does cause you to pause and rethink the aspects of your life, and you're
Right.
like, "What the hell is going on?"
But I'm just saying, knowing you and knowing you at 37, knowing me at 37, bitch, what was we equipped to do with some children?
Girl,
You understand what
not
I'm
that.
saying?
I was getting married, I
Right.
think, at 40, 37, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
got married at 37, I
so I'm just saying that resentment does build.
think.
And
Mhm.
it is a keeping score thing. It like that keeping score thing is very real, right?
Yeah,
So that was what
and
I
it
said
can
was
seep, and it's
yes,
something that builds like drip, 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 drip,
yes,
drip.
yes.
Yes, and it
So
takes over,
the
or it
second,
can.
yes, it
Mhm.
can. The second one that I said was very important was health or medical issues.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is a a a fear of mine because I have my own health issues, right?
Mhm.
Everybody does,
Yep.
right? Um, but you have to start to wonder how your partner feels constantly having to
Mhm.
deal with whatever medical situation you have going on.
Yeah.
I
We
was
talked about
what
yeah, yeah.
I was yeah, I was watching this show
Mhm.
and um it wasn't a real life show. It was like a episode of some show I was watching.
Mhm.
And the woman had cancer, had to go through chemo, radiation. She just wasn't um physically up to
Able.
being intimate with her husband. Her
Mhm.
husband, I mean, and her husband was an asshole through this whole show.
Right.
But and he winds up cheating on her and cheating on her with one of her best friends.
Mm.
And that's the side thing. But they started to talk about how he felt. He started to resent her because he was like, I know I said better or worse in sickness and in health, but I didn't really know
Mm.
that I was going to have to deal with the sickness part.
People never are ready for that part. They only
Never.
wanted they only want everything happy and rainbows and unicorns and shit like nothing's ever going to happen.
Right. And I love you. And I feel like, yes, you are the love of my life, but there were needs that I need that had to be met, and you could not meet them
Mhm.
physically, emotionally. And said he was taxed, he was exhausted because having to take care of her and the kids just drained him. And I'm not saying that he was right,
Mhm.
but I understand how some people can get to that point. Well, I understand how people get to that point when they don't communicate, when they
Right.
avoid conflict, because you don't want to engage. I feel like if that were ever to happen to me, please have the conversation with me.
Mhm.
before you decide to do anything crazy like that, because
Most people don't or won't.
the resentment doesn't have to build.
Hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. It's we talked about it in our endo group. We've had a couple our endometriosis black group. We've had a couple sessions or workshops where we talk about living with a chronic illness and being married.
mm,
And what does that do for your spouse? And I have multiple chronic illnesses, unfortunately. And, not to put all my business out there, but, my husband and I have had some trying times, even though he knew going into, and that's partly why I married so late, because I didn't want to burden anybody with the ailments that I had, knowing how severe they could be and how debilitating they could be. And that's not something I wanted to put on somebody. And
mhm,
most of my life, I've tried to, probably unfortunately to my detriment, have kept a lot of what I needed and not addressing my needs because I didn't want to be a burden
mhm.
on him. But even there was a conversation that we had had at one time, and I'm like, I know I'm sick, but you didn't sign up for this, and we just need to dead it, and I'm gonna go do my own thing and do over here because this is a lot for you. And then I felt guilty. But then there were times when we had the conversation. I know you must have some resentment, and because of how you may feel when you may be trying to take care of me and things, and you can't fix it because he's a fixer.
Well, most
And
men are fixers.
yeah,
That's what
and
they
then
want to
not
do.
exactly, and he couldn't fix it because it's chronic. And I'm sure that there were times where I know for a fact there's been some resentment there, but it's also been on the other side as well.
Mhm.
For me and some of the stuff that he's gone through with it, like with the child support and the child custody thing, and me having to go down to Virginia in a court and testify all these times, so it changes hands and may show up differently. But
Yeah,
that medical thing, that that's heavy.
it is. And you don't, I think that when people, I think there are two areas in life that people really need to have a conversation with people about before they enter into it.
Mhm.
One is health, and well, no, one is marriage and
Mhm.
one is pregnancy. Okay.
Mhm. Finances.
Well, yeah, finances, but what I mean by finances is all encompassing in marriage, right?
Right.
When you don't have a full, complete picture of what it means to be married
Ooh, you're
and the
preaching.
things that go into being married, that is when a lot of complications and miscommunication happen. Right?
I'm just
You
sapping
go
over
into a
here, y'all.
marriage, I feel like there needs to be like something in school or something because people don't really understand what you have to put into being in a marriage. And
Yes.
when you say these
This
vows,
shit
people
is
say the vows,
hard.
but what do you really mean by this? In richer or for poorer? People
And
just look at all that, and the thing is, I always say this, I'm very proactive. So going into a situation, I'm like, yes, it's for richer, but I need to be prepared for poorer. Yes,
mhm.
it's in sickness and in health. I no health, but I'm preparing for sickness. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I go into situations always having a backup plan, planning for the worst. Not to say that I'm doom and gloom because I'm not,
Mhm.
but I'm also a realist and understand that things can happen. And so
Mhm.
if things happen, what can we do? Okay, now that I'm married, let me make sure my long-term disability is set in place because if something
Yep.
happens to either one of us, we need to make sure that stuff is secured and
Yep.
locked.
Life insurance, all those types of things too.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
have to prepare for those things. But a lot of people
Don't.
don't really sit and take the time to have those conversations and really fully prepare yourself. Pregnancy,
That right there.
conversations that really need to be had around pregnancy.
Ooh.
Like people get pregnant and thinking that it's going to be one thing and then it's not. And it does lead to resentment. These
Yes.
things lead to resentment. Like you getting married to somebody, okay, and then y'all having you trying to have a baby. You can't. But and it's not based on you, it's based on your wife. Okay, now you resent her because she can't give you a child. Or
Yep.
you're a woman who can have a child, but your partner got issues with him and he can't. Or y'all don't know what the issue is.
Right.
It is not showing that it's you or him.
Mm-hmm.
So now y'all resent each other because it's just like, well, why I get married to you if I knew I wouldn't have got married to you if I knew.
Right.
We always look at the happy but never prepare for the sad.
Never do. And
It's a
people
lot
don't
of
know how to
people.
process it.
No, it's a lot of people married to people, and the person like you get married and the person has a stroke, and now you got to take care of him, and you resenting it because I didn't sign up for this. Yes, you did,
Yes, you did.
but you did though.
But you
But you
did.
did though.
That part right there, but you did though.
But you did though. Yeah, that situation wasn't present when you started dating them and you got engaged and you got married, but that's what you signed up for.
Hello.
That doesn't mean that there's not going to be resentment there, but you can try to curb that resentment by having the conversation while it's going on
Mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out a balance. It's going to be hard.
Yeah. They need to bring back home ec. Remember back in the day when you had to carry a bag of flour or an egg and you were
Mhm.
partnered up with somebody and
Mhm.
who had to babysit and like that shit was real. Like folks were like, well, I want to go hang out. You can't. Well, I don't want to have this baby no more. Well, you should have thought of that before you went and picked up that bag of flour.
Right.
But
But
you know
but
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying?
yeah, but I I kind of like think that like when you really have an honest conversation about these life events, if people really got real,
Yes.
just
If they
having
got
real
real.
conversation, it would be totally different. Because again, you have to understand when you are taking on, or like parents, if you're having a child, how you gonna resent the child that didn't ask to be brought into this world?
Hello.
They didn't ask to be here, so now you
Happens all the
resent
time.
them because you can't go out,
Yep.
because now you don't have the money to move around and maneuver like you used to.
Mhm.
So now you putting that resentment on a child that ain't even asked to be here.
Mhm. Well,
This is where a lot of conflicts in families come.
yeah, so
Or
true.
you're a person who gets. I watched Queer Eye, and this woman, long story short, went to jail, came out of jail, was avoiding her adult children. She had like 6 or 7 children or something. Um, and before she even went to jail, she was having conflicts with raising her children and being a
Mm,
mother because she said she was never taught how to love. So she
yeah,
didn't know how to love her children. And her
right.
children, some of her children resented her, rightfully so,
Uh-huh.
for how she raised them
Right.
and how she was towards them, rightfully so.
Mhm. It's hard
It
if you
is.
don't have that guidance in some way, shape, or form because it does not automatically happen. It's learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You don't come out knowing how to do all these things. You don't come out knowing how to be a husband, a wife, a parent. Like, yeah, there's books and everything, but you would have to read them.
Mm-hmm.
And then people do what they know, and then people don't know what they don't know,
They don't.
you know?
And, you know, the to say all this to say is like we all have resentment. Some people resent people for things, have resentment that are over the dumbest things.
Yep.
Some people have resentment over real life shit, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like, like I said, the real life shit is the keeping score, the health for chronic issues. That's some
Yeah.
real life shit. But
That
how do
impacts
we
your
let this,
day to day.
right? But how do you let it go? Because you cannot let this fester. You cannot let
Yeah.
this control you. I know people who maneuver and operate in a sense, who operate just constantly day to day in a space of resentment, bitterness,
Mm. Every day.
anger,
Yep.
shame.
And they all build
This
on
is
one
how they
another.
operate every single day.
That is
How?
exhausting
It has to be.
because
But
I've
you
listened to people and I'm like, how in the world?
be- but if you see it, it will start to, you see how it manifests in their life.
Mhm.
You see it.
It's
If you
draining
just take a step
sometimes.
back, you're like, God, this is look at how you gain a lot of weight around the middle because you have
Yes.
so much stress. The cortisol is just out. Now you looking like, you know, Halle Berry on top, but Professor Clump on the bottom.
Yeah.
All because you just carrying all this negative stuff
Yes. And you
and you
suck
know it.
out.
You as soon as you step in a room, it's like,
Woo!
oh God, they suck
Here
all
they
of the
come.
air
Here
out of
they
the
come.
room.
And it's amazing how that one person can throw off.
Energy is everything. And I
Energy is
said
real.
we were going to do a podcast episode about low vibration, high vibration,
Hmm.
how your energy, you don't even, and the thing is, if you get out of your own way sometimes and you just stop thinking that you are perfect, you're
Yes.
perfect set specimen and there's nothing wrong with you. If people just get out of their way sometimes, they will be able to see how they physically show up.
Yes. Because most
If
people have
somebody,
no idea that are in
they
that
don't,
space. Those that are in that space don't have the awareness or wherewithal.
right. I've gotten to the point now where I am fully aware of how I show up.
Hmm.
I know when I'm showing up anxious. I may not know sometimes in the moment, but when I leave a situation, I'm like, damn, I was really anxious in that situation. Damn,
Hmm.
I was really nasty in that situation. Damn, I was really judgmental in that situation. I can
Hmm.
step back,
But you got to be aware enough to step
but
back
some of us aren't.
at all.
So we what do
Oblivious.
we do on this podcast? Give you tools.
That's all we got.
We all we got. We can tell you how to get out of it, to let it
Yes.
go.
And with the letting it go, we've talked about this on one of our other episodes about, practice forgiveness. Now, as we've said before, it doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the action that led to the resentment, but rather acknowledging the harm that was done and finding a way to let go of the negative emotions associated with it. This is a process. It's very difficult. It can be a very difficult
Mm-hmm.
process. And you can go and be good one day and not and pissed off the next. But it can be once you've reached that process, that point where you can let it go, it's liberating, it's empowering. It's like you have a weight lifted off your shoulders and you're frolicking. It can lead to frolicking. I don't know if they still have that meme where like, oh,
Yeah,
we
we
out the
frolic.
brothers was like out
Mm-hmm.
here frolicking and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
it can empower you and be like, you know what, I can't even get that's I'm not feeling that. I'm not here to match that energy. I'm moving on. But it is a process, to let go of the resentment. Think about why it may definitely help you to consider why letting go is so difficult. What feelings come up, from moving on? Are there things that are triggering for you? Are you fearful of what's on the other side? Or do you think you're going to lose your identity if you let go of the resentment? Like, who
Well,
am I without my resentment?
there's some people who live in their victimhood. They don't
Yes.
know who they are if they're not a
Yes.
victim.
Whoo! I've seen that. And you ask them, like, why are you still in this situation? And every time they give you every situation, every excuse, and you're like, okay, but you've known that for years.
Because some people are comfortable in their narrative and the
Right.
narrative that they have created for themselves. And
Correct.
leaving that narrative,
Is not something they're equipped to do or wanting to. And I think everybody goes through that phase at some point in their life for different situations. And either you stay there or you move through it and on to other things. And part of that is using your own self compassion. Sometimes a lot of folks who hold on to resentment for long periods of time, the anger and the regret that they have, it's a sense of security for them. Like they said, they live with that victimhood, but giving yourself some grace and stepping back, like you said, may allow some folks to recognize that while it's a coping mechanism and it makes them feel better in the short term, it can really wear them out as time progresses. And then they just kind of get like when people are like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
at some
mm-hmm,
point they're like, I need to do something. I need
mm-hmm,
to do something.
mm-hmm.
But sometimes it takes people to hit rock bottom for them to acknowledge that and move forward. And then looking at empathy. Empathy is so, so important. A person that has caused a resentment may have been based on a misunderstanding or the person did something hurtful and they don't understand what they've done to you. There are a lot of people that are oblivious and you may interpret something that they did and that other person is like, what are you talking about? Like they really don't know what it is that they did to trigger you to resent them. And but maybe stepping back and saying, well, maybe I can see it from their perspective. Maybe they thought I was doing this. or
Mhm.
maybe I was coming at them this way where I really didn't. Or that's
Right.
not how I intended to come off. And now that person is shading me, and now I'm resenting that person being shady to me. And
And
it's just lack of communication.
that's something that I'm currently working on. Like I let go. I have empathy for my mother, right? So I let
Mhm.
all that go. I still have resentment to my mother's best friend. A
Mhm.
lot of resentment that I still need to work through and process.
Mhm.
Because my mother's best friend was like, y'all, how y'all are to Charlie is how my mother's best friend was to me.
Right.
I, for the longest time, really thought that she was my aunt, right? Like, until I understood how families work and she wasn't my blood aunt, I really thought that she was my aunt. And I
Mhm.
called her aunt.
Mhm.
And when my mother passed away, she kind of just disappeared. And she
Right.
was giving my mom was telling me about how there was things that my mom was resenting about her towards the end of her life.
Mhm.
And I look at how she treated my mom towards the end of her life. And this is based in my mom's reality. I don't know how my aunt would see it from
Right.
her perspective. From my mother's perspective, this is how it was shown to me.
Mhm.
But then I also looked at how she just stopped talking to me and my sister.
Mhm.
Like, she didn't check on us. We were young
Yeah.
women. We didn't have a mother anymore. We, I can't speak for my sister. I could have benefited from having her in my life as a strong female figure
Yeah.
as I started to navigate my 20s.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I didn't have that. And so I still have a lot of resentment towards her. And she's, friended me on Facebook, and she will, say things here and there, or if I post something with Charlie. But I think she kind of gets the vibe.
Right.
But I also understand that there's probably a lot of shame there on her end. So I'm trying to work through that resentment.
And it was her best friend that passed, so at your age, thinking that she would have stepped up to do certain things, she may have not been in a space because she lost her best friend,
And that's where there's right.
and where the empathy comes in.
And exploring empathy is something that I'm definitely trying with. Like,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with my sister sometimes about maybe reaching out to her so that she can meet Charlie, because she hasn't. She's
Mhm.
met Jackson before, but only when he was a little younger, like maybe he was 2.
Right.
Um, and seeing how that is, I don't want to contact her and do that unless I'm sure when I see her
Right.
that is not that resentment is still not going to be there projected into her on
Right.
her, I should say. So I'm still working through that. Um and it's something that it's funny that you don't really realize. I'm 40, man, how old am I? 46 years old, and I'm still holding on to this from when I was 20. And I
Right.
think it's because I'm so close to all of you, and I'm close to, your children, and
Right.
I can't imagine now. My relationship definitely isn't as close knit as that relationship was, like, to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, this
Right.
was like, and this was my mom's only friend. So it wasn't like there were other people competing for that attention from us. It was just her and us.
Right.
But I'd be damned if I wouldn't still check up on your children and be there in whatever capacity and try to impart some knowledge and wisdom. I just
Right.
can't see myself not
Not
doing
doing
that.
that. Yeah.
So I'm still working and processing through that
It's a lot.
so that I at least maybe can still have a relationship
A
with her.
relationship at some, maybe at some
And
point,
then I can get to know my mother
through her.
through her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing, and something that I don't think necessarily has a roadmap per se. So like you
Hmm.
said, we're just giving you some tools and some things to think about. And then, cultivating gratitude. When your feelings of resentment bubble up, you know, try to list things that you're grateful for. So we talked about that when during the depression screening event this weekend. So when I started out the group, and I said, okay, first of all, before we get into the depression, anxiety, and all that stuff, go around the room and say something you're thankful for.
Hmm.
And then try to see through that lens what it is that we're talking about in the framework of depression and other mental health challenges. And it can kind of give you a step back to be like, okay, so I feel this way, and maybe I feel I'm privileged to be able to do this even though this is what's getting me down. And it doesn't always work, and that's part of life, but it may give you a different perspective of, okay, I know I'm resenting this person and feeling these feelings and resentment, but on the other hand, I'm happy that, you know, I can still go do something else that I didn't think I could do. Some to that effect. I can't think of an example right
Right.
now. But it may distract you from focusing on the self victimization, and before it can take root, because you are thankful for everything. Case in point, there's an individual in my life that everything is woe is me, and I'm just like, but, at least you have this, this, and this. And they're like, well, yeah, but that's just not like da 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 da. And I'm like, oh my Lord. And I'm
Right.
listening to them complain, and you can tell that they have resentment. And she's like, don't you think such and such? And I should agree. And I'm like, look here, I just got over brain surgery, so I'm just happy to be on the phone talking to you. So there's that. And then sometimes that person will be like, okay, well, you kind of got a point. I guess I should be thankful for what I have and not
Mhm.
focus on the resentment.
Right.
But it's different for everybody because you don't know where in that process people are.
Yeah.
And it's a lifelong process for some,
Yeah.
and some people need a lot of resentment builds up to the divorce, if people get divorced.
Mhm.
And then that's why they stay single, because they never want to get back into a relationship because they have all these other feelings, which are understandable and justifiable, but not thinking about all the good things that may have led to you being where
Right.
you are.
Or being estranged from your family,
Yes.
not losing friends, etc., etc.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm.
I hope we've imparted some wisdom, knowledge, power onto you with resentment.
Mhm.
And we're going to take a quick break and come back with the last of the day. And we're back. This is the last sip of tea. Resentment is a complex emotion that can arise from a variety of experiences. While it can be a natural response to certain situations, it is important to address it in a healthy and constructive way in order to avoid negative consequences. By practicing forgiveness and finding ways to let go of negative emotions, we can move forward and live happier, more fulfilling lives.
Amen. Hallelujah. So, like Z said, hope you got some stuff out of this and can apply it to your life in the areas that resentment may show up. But all in all, we still thank you for joining us this week on Sippin' Tea with Nat and Z. As you know, you can follow us on Instagram at Sippin' Tea _ Nat and Z _ pod, and on Facebook at Sippin' Tea Nat and Z to get info on our podcast topics, guests, and news. Thanks for listening, and catch us next episode where we get into how to enjoy this summer. We outside, y'all. We outside.